On the online side, you know, we only really have, when you divide up our day, about 40 minutes right now of real computer time that kids are doing. And before we start to grow that, we want to see about a quarter year of growth coming from the online side. And I'll talk a lot more about kind of how we see what's going to be effective for us as an elementary school online, but what we're really trying to get to is when does online learning have about the same learning per hour as classroom learning? Because once you start to get close to that point, then you know, you have to balance your school not based on, well, it doesn't really work, so you can't do much of it, which is kind of where everybody is today, to, okay, now these are both vehicles for helping kids to learn. How do you mix them and blend them to get the best result? And this is kind of the way we look at it. Since we're a project-based learning school, and people who do project-based learning can tell you that one of the toughest things about project-based learning is when you're doing project-based learning with kids who don't have a lot of the basic skills, you end up kind of going back and doing a lot of basic skills work, and you kind of don't quite get to the value of some of your project-based learning. So the real goal is, what if you could automate a lot of basic skills acquisition work for kids? And you know, taking math as an example, you certainly need to have introduction and some practice with teachers on things like two-digit addition, but let's face it, what do you do to learn two-digit addition? You do a ton of it. And so while people have always disparaged computers for drill and kill and things like that, the reality is this is what computers are good at, is automating tasks and being patient enough with kids that when they're doing these kind of things like sight words and practicing addition and things like that, you do it in a fun environment where they're motivated to do it, and you do it a lot. And so we do think that's the role for the computer. We're not kind of ambitious enough to say somehow it's really going to teach kids how to think online. That's hard. But the beauty of that, if we can do that, is that now teachers get to teach. There are very few teachers who went into the profession, I think, to become excellent at teaching basic skills and to spend, you know, 40 weeks teaching letter name, letter sound in kindergarten and things like that. That's just not why you're a teacher. You're a teacher because you want to make connections with kids, and you want to teach values, and you want to teach them how to think. I mean, that's the good stuff. This is the real pie in the sky 5-10 years from now. You can imagine moving to a world where you're splitting your day between basic skills and thinking skills, and you're spending half your time online, half your time classroom, you know, 4 hours of each for us. This gets very compelling in terms of the way it changes the school. You save about $1 million a year. You only need 10 teachers, which, you know, could sound wrong, but when you're trying to grow a lot of schools, this is your bottleneck. It's how much talent do you have? So the fewer teachers per school, the more schools you can start. It's not like you're going to hire in fewer teachers. You just get more schools out of that number of teachers. And you can pay your teachers between $100,000 and $125,000 a year if you're splitting your day between online and classroom. And the other thing you can do, which we really think about a lot on the sustainability for teacher side, is if you have an RTI program and online learning that are delivering to the teachers basic skills acquisition so that they can count on that, you are removing that as one of the primary burdens that they face, right? So if you think about teaching, it's this amazing bundle of things you have to be good at as a teacher, right? It's kind of like, you know, in every other profession, lawyers have paralegals and doctors have nurses, and teachers are just teachers, right? And they're just doing everything all at once, from basic skills to thinking skills to working with parents to, you know, being the spiritual leader. And so we're very interested in the idea that, you know, if you can provide things to teachers like a lot of basic skills acquisition and other resources at the school that help them on their parent engagement and other things that they have to spend lots of time on, it could actually be a pretty good job. You know, you're making good salary now, you're teaching kids how to think, you've got some support for doing the things that you had to do all yourself manually. So that's kind of our vision 5-10 years from now, is if we could get it to transform so that teachers were really what we've all imagined them being, that would be exciting to us. We really found that this is an industry where technology and use of technology has been possibly the worst of any industry in the world. You know, probably right up there with healthcare, and I think healthcare is actually doing better now, which really is sad. But the way it plays out with online curricula is that when you ask basic questions of people who make online curricula, they can't even answer those. One obvious one that we asked first was, well, we're a school, so we don't really think we should be technical experts, which means we shouldn't have a bunch of servers lying around our school that they break and we reboot and stuff like that. So can you just put your stuff online? Can you actually have it in the cloud or web-based? Because we don't want to have anything to do with that. And unfortunately, in the education world, because there's so little money for kind of R&D for these companies, they hadn't re-architected their systems to be online, and so a lot of them are either server-based or they say that they've got a caching server, which is just code word for there's another big box there that's going to break on you at some point. And so that actually, for us, as we were doing our search, and we did a very comprehensive search on elementary literacy and math, throughout somewhere around 80 or 90% of the vendors were still back in that world where they were shipping servers or doing stuff like that. The second thing we asked was, well, okay, so if you want to be strategic to our school, you need to show us results that line up with the way our teachers look at the world. So our teachers have top 10 standards, they have objectives that they're trying to make sure kids master, and so your lessons need to be tied to objectives, and you need to report back to us on how kids are doing on those things. And once you do that, our teachers will embrace it and our schools will use your stuff. And I was really surprised at the number of vendors who had really interesting stuff, and it seemed like it did the right things, but they couldn't tell you how it aligned with what you were trying to do. And so you could say that's really good stuff, so we'll just spend all our time trying to figure out how it fits, but we don't really have time for that. We want to know, here's what you're accomplishing by using this program. And so that got us down to a very small set of companies that actually could both do things online and could report back to us on what had happened in a way we understood. I do think we're at a time as a country where this stuff really fits pretty well with economic crises. I mean, when you're in a situation where you're going to be laying people off anyway, how do you make that as good as possible? And one of the ways is to have more of the work happening somewhere other than a classroom through technology and other things. We've been admirers of Denver for a long time because it's kind of a place with the right energy, and as Silicon Valley people, we like kind of the entrepreneurship and the way that Denver's looked at things. I would say that the things that we've seen from afar, and I don't know anything, so you guys will tell me that I'm wrong about all of this, but I think there's a cohort of really good foundations now that kind of are in the game, which, as you guys know, that's not true for all cities around the country. You go some places, San Jose being a good example actually, where the foundations just kind of aren't in the game yet. They're not, this is not their thing, and so that's hard to get over. I've heard good and bad about all the political side, but I would say that it's not a hostile environment is probably one way of looking at it, and that's still a good thing in the charter school world to be supportive and not hostile.